Welcome to the Nonprofits. Colorado's extended an offer to private religious preschools to join its universal preschool program, complete with attractive government subsidies, but with one catch. Schools must all follow the same rules. However, some religious preschools, particularly those under the financially struggling Archdiocese of Denver, want to have it both ways. Despite their declining enrollment and impending closure of schools like Wellspring, they're fighting for the right to exclude children from LGBTQ families, all while trying to grab the taxpayers' money. After losing their case last year, they're now appealing, banking on the Christian-friendly Supreme Court to reverse this decision. It's another classic case of I want the free money, but I also want to be a discriminatory bigot. This archdiocese is stubbornly clinging to its bigotist policies, ignoring the fact that public funds come with public obligations. This story is from the Denver Post by Ann Schmidt on September 22nd, 2024. First, I have to say that we talk about the Catholic Church here. We've talked about this time and time again. It's not like it's something new, but it feels like that this may even overshadow some of the other things of absurdity of the Catholic Church. What's your read on this? What do you think they're coming from?
It kind of blew me away right at the very beginning, because the second paragraph in the article starts with the line, "At the center of the case are two Catholic preschools in suburban Denver that want exemptions from state non-discrimination rules." They're filing in order to do the thing that they want to do. They're like, okay, like how do we make this happen? Like, well, we need exemption from non-discrimination laws. Oh yeah, we can discriminate. Yeah, let's do that. So how do we discriminate? And I like the idea that they're like, hey, we want to discriminate, and nobody is looking at this. Somebody is making like decisions every day to push this process along, and none of them are like, are we the baddies? Like none of them, it hasn't caught on to anybody. Exactly. It's like the skulls on the hat, and they're like, hold on a minute. Nobody, it's not coming to anybody's attention that like this is the wrong thing to do. They want state money without following state rules. And of all the rules that they don't want to follow, it's the one that like says like, hey, like you just have to treat people like people.
You know, it's not a surprise. I don't think any of us are surprised that the Catholic Church is saying, hey, we think we deserve a special right to get the money and discriminate against the people. That's something that we see time and again. And Jonathan, I was wondering, you know, what do you think about this? I know that particularly here in this archdiocese, there have been different people who child molesters, pedophiles, all welcomed into the fold there as far as leadership. How do you think the church even tries to rationalize these two disparate behaviors?
I think they rationalize it by, we're the church, we can do what we want. It's insane to me that a church who has a large population of their priests, bishops, cardinals, and I don't think the Pope, but the Pope is an enabler. They're either enablers or pederasts. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why can we let them get away with the duplicity? You know, that's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's not safe for the kids to be in Catholic Church. And I don't mind saying that. Catholic Church is one of the largest international criminal organizations in the world. And they have been for a long time. And besides all their, mea culpa on doing things like sending indigenous people to schools that murder them and bury them in their backyards, and things like that, mea culpa is not going to solve that issue. And the issue of trying to say, but we want to be bigoted because it's our firmly held religious belief that it's okay for us to be bigoted. Your firmly held religious belief should not be infringing on other people's rights and shouldn't be allowing you to take my money as an atheist taxpayer to fund your religious bullshit. So that's that. And that's a hard line. You don't get to have public money if you want to be bigoted, discriminatory assholes. All right. And your church is a ripoff to begin with. So we won't get into the long list of grievances I have against the church that I never belonged to, but I have a few. So just to say, stop trying to legalize bigotry within your organization or outside your organization, or force other people to help you legalize your bigotry just because you have 6 members on the Supreme Court who are Catholics. And you know what? That's it. I get really emotional about this. This is something that hits too close to home.
Even if you've rationalized in your mind that it's somehow demonic or evil or whatever to be queer, let's say you've somehow managed to allow that thought to nest and grow. How do you in turn discriminate against children of those people? Because even if they're bad, terrible people, wouldn't that be all the more reason that you as an organization should reach out to these young innocent children and teach them the right way if people are so bad? I've had a situation here where my youngest has dealt with a classmate, and I knew the background of that kid and more than what she knew. And so with that in mind, I kind of filled them in on the issue. And the idea to me is, as I told them, look, you don't know what that kid's going through. So be nice to them and see how they treat you. And they started being nice to them. And the kid would see me in the store and say, hey, Gabriel's dad, because they developed a relationship that went past those years because of that difference of what that kid's home life was. So I don't understand why a religious organization will say these adults are bad, therefore we're going to deny their kids. Does that seem upside down to even religious doctrine to you, Eli?
Yeah, honestly, it does, because it's not the whole, love thy neighbor sort of thing. Now, I of course, I would disagree with the idea of doing that, of saving kids from their non-heteronormative.
You're not saving them,
of course,
trust me.
Of course not, right? And I didn't think you were implying that, but yeah, it definitely does go against the whole. It's a Great Commission, even Matthew 28. To make disciples, right? So and that's the thing that I was thinking as you were talking. The reason that they feel the right to discriminate, the right to basically be so public or in the public space with the tenets and the rules of Christianity is because one of the rules of Christianity is to make everybody else a Christian, make as many Christians as you can. So I agree with you. They if they were following that, they should be. What they're doing here is literally just being hateful. The reason to not take in the parents of those, or the children of, the reason to not take in children from those families is so that they don't have to, confront or be confronted with or experience non-heteronormative families, in their presence, because it makes them uncomfortable and they're cowards.
I think that one reason that we see this push against people interacting and being around non-heteronormative couples is the fact that the more they're around people who are outside of that little bubble that they exist within, that they realize they're just fucking people. There's no special little, it's not like you're watching a Boys episode and some giant head's going to fly off and you're going to see something that looks like an alien. This is the real world. And the people that they're busy demonizing are just people. And sometimes I wonder if that's not part of the plan, is because if people are around people that they aren't experienced with, that they come to that realization that maybe they're not the devil. Just like earlier we were talking about the people in church who are around the people who are nice and friendly and go, well, you know what, they're good people. That also can be spoken of people when they're around people who may be people of color or, LGBTQ, and they see it and say, oh, this is okay. And I often wonder if that's not part of what they're afraid of. Now, Jonathan, switching back to you, what would be your advice? Because for me, I have a definite set of viewpoint about it. What would be your advice, even if it were legal, for a LGBTQ family to send their kid to a Catholic indoctrination preschool?
Don't do it. They will spend the rest of their lives in therapy trying to get over all the bullshit you shove down their throat. So don't ruin their lives by giving them a bunch of useless nonsense that will put the fear in them that they have to deal with for the rest of their lives. That's just basically it. And that goes for a lot of religions. Now, not all of them. Granted, there are some churches that are better than others. But to me, if you're teaching fantasy as fact, you're not doing anybody any favor. So, a myth mythology is not a fact. So, it's a story, and if you're teaching it as a story or as literature, that's perfectly fine because it is literature and it is a story. You're teaching it as a fact or as real history. No, you're not doing them any favors. That's not going to help them get by in the world at all as children or as adults, actually worse as adults. And so I would definitely say don't do that. Then again, as a victim myself, I would say stay the hell away from any priest. Just don't let your kids alone with any religious person, especially not youth pastors or pastors of any church or reverends or anything like that. Because if you want to find a groomer and a pedophile, look there, because they're the ones who are busted for it more than any other profession. So, there's jails are full of them, so don't let your kids be alone with anybody, that you have not, and even people you have good relationships with sometimes can be ugly underneath.
Yes, I'm a very untrusting person. And as I look at situations and, you when you give out that trust with your children, it's a very difficult thing because there are people, and you ultimately at the end of the day, you don't know what's in anybody's head. But it's kind of like when one of the bank robbers is asked, why do you rob banks? It's because that's where the money's at. Well, at the same time, and I'm not trying to say that all people that are work in preschools are pedophiles by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're going to go for unfettered access of kids, church leadership isn't a bad gig because it gives you an automatic level of trust that many other people don't get. And that is a very dangerous thing. Now, I did also notice, Eli, that they didn't want an exemption for all their schools. Some of their schools, they were like, okay, we're going to go with it. And these other schools, they wanted the exemption. I kind of felt like they looked at the ones that were, okay, we're going to let those people in as being their way to proselytize and reach out to the community and get people in their organization. What was your take? Well, why would you think they would split and say some were going to accept this and some were going to fight it, and we want to keep our discrimination?
It's really difficult to say, and I'm not sure about that because I noticed that there's only 2 preschools that are kind of at the center of this whole thing. And then what the article says is that the Archdiocese of Denver refused to allow most of his preschools to sign the non-discrimination clause that was required for preschool. So it could be one of 2 things. Maybe there's a few that he's like, hey, attendance is low enough. We need the money. So you're just going to have to let the broken kids in, as he might, that's not my opinion, just to be clear. But like that's one possible explanation. I don't know what that is. That's strange to me. But the thing that really, we've already said, these other preschools that don't want to sign the non-discrimination clause, they want the state money without following state rules. Anytime you want someone to give you money, there's almost always some rules behind it. Sometimes that rule is like, have a product that I want. Sometimes that rule is be a charity that I like. Sometimes it's be a public education institution that doesn't discriminate against anybody based on like a protected status. And then you can have state money. But they're like, well, we don't want to follow that rule. It doesn't matter. You have to. You got these few that are doing it already. So just do that more. It's really tough to see it's not tough to see what's going on. We know why they don't want to allow, LGBTQ students or children from those families, but
despite what the Pope says, right?
Right. Yeah. I remember hearing a call on one of the call-in shows recently. Well, the Pope says that it's, it's okay to love gay people or something like that. So I don't know.
They're allowed to be in the congregation, so,
cool. I believe it because the Pope said it, right? But as a
gay man, I'm not interested. Sorry.
But this archdiocese apparently isn't convinced. So I don't know. Churches seem to have forgotten like how far removed they're supposed to be from the government. And I'd love to see them out of education too, but I think that's kind of a long shot. And it just seems like they think they're supposed to be immune to the Establishment Clause or the Johnson Amendment. And those are the very things that churches are the very institution that those things were intended for. So it's, you got to wonder how this keeps getting mixed up.
Well, I just wanted to summarize that Eli thinks some kids are broken and that
Oh,
We should
by
now
the way,
cancel
Eli,
him.
you just got on the hit list from the Velvet Mafia. I just, I typed your name in. So,
That's it. You're
Fair
on.
enough. No, that's
Now,
fine.
seriously though, this whole thing, it seems like we do this song and dance over and over again, where we see a rule, somebody want to break the rule, somebody break the rule and then sue so that to get the right to break the rule, and ultimately it ends up in the Supreme Court. And right now, that is not always a good side for us to want to see things go. Jonathan, what do you think? If this makes it to the Supreme Court, what do you think the Supreme Court's going to ultimately decide on this?
I think they're going to have a hard time allowing it to go because they put some limitations on it with that Maine case, that public funding of private religious education can only happen when there is no other option in the area. In other words, they're remote. It's too far away to bus these kids all the way to the next high school or all the way to the next elementary school because it's a remote place, right? So they had a lot of restrictions. I have the case here someplace. I could probably dig it out, but it's not about this. So, I think when they look at their own precedent from the same judges, they say justices, I say, but then they might have something to say like, I'm sorry, but this goes a step too far. And, and I'm hoping they would, but with this Supreme Court, you can't tell. I mean, they give the president immunity, which is in the Constitution that he doesn't have it. And they went against the Constitution to make that ruling. So it's like, what are you going to do? If they want to violate the Constitution, they think they're above it. So, as long as they have a Congress that isn't willing to impeach them for being corrupt, there's very little we can do about it.
Up until Roe v. Wade was overturned, we were hearing, what are you guys all in a panic for? That's nothing going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. And of course, now we're hearing with IVF, oh, what are you worried about? Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. But of course, nothing is a concern until it actually is. And with this court, it's shown an immediate willingness to overthrow precedent. So it is definitely a concern. But having said that, Eli,
and not read the Constitution, which is what they're supposed to be doing.
Without a doubt. And of course, they're supposed to be originalists, but original what, I'm not sure. So Eli, any questions?
Or something, who knows? Goes back farther than our country.
Any comments you wanted to make, Eli?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so the case I thought you were going to mention, John, is another one from Maine, 2022's Carson v. Macon. So like my thought was like my first thought, the obvious solution to me, don't let religious schools participate. They're like, if you want to follow your religious rules, you can do that. You just don't get state funding. But Carson v. Macon set the precedent in 2022 in Maine that religious schools cannot be excluded from publicly funded programs if secular private schools are allowed to participate. So that was kind of just shut down my whole idea. Now, fortunately, I think as you did, I think mentioned in your intro, the infidel, that the district judge, John Kane, disagrees that the church has the right to discriminate or that their rights are being violated, and ruled that the state of Colorado is applying non-discrimination clauses or rules in a neutral and generally applicable way, which is a quote from the ruling. But it really has only slowed the church down. As you mentioned, like they're appealing, they're trying to get to the Christian-friendly Supreme Court like we've talked about before. This is one of those Supreme Courts where like something like this could potentially be allowed to slip through the cracks. So we can't be confident they're going to follow what the Constitution says anymore, what it's supposed to be. It seems like it's more like guidelines at this point anyway. So maybe we're all just pirates now.
Everyone ignores the fact that before universal preschool was available in Colorado, you could pay to whatever bigots you wanted and they could have preschool for your kids. And right now today, you can pay to have preschool to whatever bigot you want. And so their rights at the end of the day have not been lost at all. And I'll give you a hint to anyone out there listening. If your side is for discriminating against someone else, you're probably on the wrong side consistently. But if you want to hear more nonprofits,